I see the recording is in process. Have we begun? Okay. All right, I'm sorry. We've begun, but it's not clear to me who's chairing this. So is it my role as the chair of the Southampton Housing Authority to chair this work group and to launch this meeting?
Do you have quorum of your committee? Because you'd have to call your committee to order.
We do.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's you, Jim.
All right. Here we go. So we will call this, I'm going to call this a work group, not a committee. We'll call this work group to order. We have a quorum of 3 for the Southampton Housing Authority. We see we have Mr. LaValle here, our representative from the Planning Board. We also have our 2 distinguished consultants from the AVPC. And I see another person, named Sarah. Hello, Sarah.
You're officially planning board, right?
I don't know when it becomes official, but it was the only one on the ballot yesterday. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
I'm not sure because I'm a little bit seat of the pants here, but since this is a work group and not an official meeting, do I need to read the governor's proclamation about meeting virtually?
I think it is, am I unmuted? I think it is subject to open meeting law, Jim, so I would think that's probably a necessity, yes.
Okay, all right. Well, I will, as I usually do, I'm going to paraphrase the governor's order, which is per order of the governor of Massachusetts, Governor Baker, since pretty much the beginning of the pandemic has permitted, state law permits, and I understand has been extended through April of 2022, but I'm not positive about that, that virtual meetings are allowed to encourage continued participation by citizens in the state in these in the management and of their town's business. That may not be the best summary, but that's my best summary for tonight. And so therefore we can meet virtually as we are present today. And with that, I think it makes sense for us to do introductions since we have a new person here, just make sure everyone knows who each other, who we all are. So to start us off tonight in our work group, I'll introduce myself. My name is Jim Sini. I'm the chair of the Southampton Housing Authority. And I'm going to call on folks kind of random, may seem random to you, but it's how you appear left to right to me on my screen here in Zoom. So in addition, the next person, Sarah, would you please introduce yourself and your role with us tonight?
Sure. My name's Sarah Stein, and as we were discussing, I just joined the planning board, so I'm kind of new, just getting involved, and I guess I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. And so you were just elected last night. I don't know if you've been sworn in and gone through all the processes, but I think we can, I don't know that we'll be taking any votes tonight. We'll just have to be careful with that in-between place where you are, if that's okay. I don't mean any offense.
No, that's fine. I mean, my intent had kind of been to listen in to some degree as a citizen before I was officially, in my position on the planning board. So.
Perfect. Perfect. And of course, citizens are welcome to these undertakings. That's why we have them virtually and why the governor permitted it. So appreciate your attention to this and enthusiasm about it. Elected one day, attending the next. Thank you. Next, we have Sierra.
Hi, I am Sierra Simmons, and I am a member of the Housing Authority.
Awesome. And Daniel, you're coming up next on my screen.
Yep, Daniel LaValle, 17 Glendale Road, member of the planning board. Yeah.
Perfect. And also agreed to be on this work group as a member of the planning board and to represent the planning board. And hopefully you and Sarah
Yes.
will take on that role. We appreciate that because I think we're just going to be, I like the work group. It's going to be very much a working group, I believe. Janet, you are next, please.
Yes, Janet Kane, 83 Glendale Road. I was officially sworn in for my new term as Housing Authority member.
Awesome. Awesome. So you were elected. You won. Perfect.
Yeah, nobody ran against me. I won.
A landslide, we'll call it.
I didn't check how many votes I had, but you know.
Wonderful. Thank you, Janet. Next, Ted.
Hi, Ted Harvey. I'm the assistant or the deputy director. My title just got changed, so forgive me if I get it wrong. The deputy director for community development at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. And so along with Ken, I am the experts on this particular project, but you know, take that with a grain of salt. As Jim said, this I think Ken and I view this as a definite working group.
All right. Well, we'll probably rely on you as an expert, so we'll put that pressure on you.
Sounds good.
Appreciate you being here, Ted. And the last person I'm seeing on my screen is Ken.
Hi, everyone. Ken Comey, Senior Land Use Planner in the Land Use and Environment section at PVPC. And I'm glad to be with Southampton again this year as we completed, finally, the master plan update, as well as the open space plan that we did last year. So lots of planning in Southampton, which is a great thing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Ken. I have great confidence in Ken. You know, I had the pleasure of working with him along with the rest of the master plan implementation committee members. And Ken really performed outstanding work. So again, no pressure on you either, Ken. You know, you set the bar high for yourself and now you have to meet it every time. Okay. So our goal here is to create a housing production plan. Some of us have more expertise than others, but what I'm encouraged about is there's all of us are motivated, so that's good. But how we proceed on this, I'm going to suggest, if it's all right, you know, put the pressure on right away, but our fellow conspirators in the PVPC can perhaps, if they've done this before, can give us a sense, maybe a general outline or how we should proceed best. Is that something you're comfortable doing, Ted and Ken?
Yeah.
Having done this before, I hope.
Jim, did you see the document Ken sent us today?
I am looking at it. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for Ken, but I'm thinking, especially since Sarah is newer on here, that maybe just a quick, Ken, if you want to just give a quick overview of what a housing production plan is, and then kind of what our goals for this meeting are, and then we can, the needs assessment, I will say, is it's a work in progress, so we can talk about that too, and then also what we're looking for from feedback from you guys. Is that good with everyone?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ted. So, Sarah, welcome. At the last meeting of this committee, which was at a joint session of the planning board, we explained briefly what a housing production plan is and how to go about creating one and getting it approved by the state, and as a part of your planning documents for the community. And I'll be sure to share that PowerPoint presentation with the committee again. However, I think just generally it's to create a plan that is in accordance with Mass General Law. So it's specifically outlined in the Mass General Law, with basically a 5-year plan to create affordable housing, to create housing. And in that plan, there's a comprehensive housing needs assessment, goals, and implementation strategies. So similar to what you've done in the master plan or an open space plan or the planning documents you've accomplish for the town, it is coming up with your baseline data. You're going to understand the constraints to develop housing. You're going to understand where you are with regards to your demographics, creating the conditions for housing development in Southampton. And we're going to utilize basically all the planning documents along with conversations with you all and community meetings that we'll have, and survey results from last year's survey, which amounted to about to 896 respondents from the town. So with a good chunk of housing questions that were asked in that survey. So we'll utilize that to kind of inform where we go from here. So what we're going to be doing in these first initial meetings, and also today with the hope that we can schedule a community meeting, is talking about where you are, your current baseline. And I think, as Ted said, this is a work in progress. So, you know, as you have reviewed or are reviewing, this is demographics data. This is kind of some housing inventory data that is readily available from the census. I know you probably are asking, well, it's the 2020 census, where is that data? It's still kind of maneuvering its way out. So we're going to be working with the best set of data that we have at the moment, and we'll go from there. But so the meetings with you all will be to basically go through drafts and talk about, you know, as we build this report, the drafts of the needs assessment, the drafts of some constraints we'll identify, and then we'll go through some goal setting later on in the process. And this process will last until the end of the year. So with that said, I don't know, Ted, if I captured everything, if you think I've missed something, but I think that's the general gist of this particular process.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I just wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page about what actual housing production, like what our ultimate goal here is at the end of December. So are there any, just broad right now, questions, issues you want to raise? Anybody on the group? Just about the process and again, as we go along, you know, we'll update you going forward, and if there are questions that you have today or in the next few months, you know, we'll work on those as we go.
I do have a question, Ted. Is there a standard sequence or that we proceed through this? So, you know, Ken, you mentioned, you know, certain, you know, needs and constraints, goals. Is that how we're going to go through this? Does it make sense to go in that order? That's question one. And question two, do we have an anticipatory expectation for the availability of the 2020 census data? Is there any utility in waiting a bit till it's available, or is that a fool's effort?
If I take a stab, I think with regards to the census, you know, what I'm reading is that because of the lateness of it closing, they're not looking at numbers until September. I don't know where we'll be with regards to how the census data and the data that we've collected so far, and we'll probably be presenting to the community, how different that will be. But I think we can definitely pay attention to that, especially if, you know, if the conditions are ripe to address certain goals and strategies with regards to any new census data. You know, I think that, so I think that's the second question. The first question, with regards to the process, I think typically you would start with your needs assessment. So understanding your demographics, understanding the ability to develop housing in general. So one of my questions probably today, and probably right now, will be regarding like the zoning bylaw, because we're going to need to look at the zoning bylaw. I know in my interactions with the planning board over the past year, there have been discussions of revision, and I'm not quite sure where the planning board is with regards to that. But in that revision, has there been thought and exploration of ideas of housing? That's probably a big question, especially if an analysis of the constraints to affordable housing is to examine your zoning districts and seeing where housing and multifamily housing is allowed by right, by special permit, and addressing those types of needs. So I'm not quite sure where the planning board is in that process, but I'm sure, throughout this conversation, we'll understand where they are in the process and address it from there. But I think what will end up happening is these next 2 meetings with the committee will just be, data vomit. So it'll just be data points that will be useful to set the scene for the town. With regards to environmental constraints, if there are certain parts of town that are wet, that you can't have development, it'll be good to discuss with this committee, this working group rather, the ideas of exploring your advocacy for affordable housing in town, what has been tried, what has been attempted, what passed, what didn't pass at town meeting. I know that you just had a town election yesterday, and I read about, the certain things that happened. But just imagining that and seeing how that plays into the narrative that we're going to set for this report. And then the goals, I think, are probably your traditional goal setting, identifying similar towns that probably have a similar percentage of affordable housing in the eyes of the state. So I think TED outlines 1.8% is your subsidized housing inventory. We're going to ensure that that's correct. And it looks like, I think, Jim, you probably have the knowledge that seems correct. But the state sets a goal of 10%, right? So we have to navigate a production plan on how to address creating that affordable housing. Also knowing what the sentiment of the town is. And so there's going to be some, there's going to be some discussions and hard discussions that this committee or this working group and your planning board and other people who are housing advocates and your select board on how to address increasing housing production. I think one of the goals, and I didn't mention this in the beginning, is that you don't want what they call a 40B project coming into your town. Or at least, I don't know if that's what, if you'd want to navigate the development of a 40B project, but that basically absolves everyone but the Zoning Board of Appeals to be the comprehensive permit authority, who will oversee that process of housing development to create that affordable housing number. But this will hopefully allow you to address housing in a way that will, be mindful of, what's the word? Of developing housing in a way that is both affordable and, you're not going to create too much housing, or it's not going to be in an area that it shouldn't be. Whereas a 40B project, you probably will not have the control. The town won't really have the control on how to address that. So this hopefully will address that.
A balanced approach to.
Right. Yeah, that's the word. I couldn't think of that. Balanced.
I'm a Libra.
Yeah. So yeah, Jim, that with regards to the process, I think we've outlined the first 2. We have a total of about 6 meetings between now and at the end of the year with this working group. Also in there, we'll have 2 community meetings, one to basically provide what we're providing you as the working group, which is some of your baseline data and doing some exercises to capture some sentiment of the community. And then the second one will be to go over strategies and implementation, as we'll be defining and understanding with your committee, your working group. So that's the goal.
Okay.
I just wanted to quickly add to the data, the census, that piece of Jim's question. The requirement, the housing production plan, and I think Ken has mentioned this in the past, it's pretty prescribed. There are certain things that have to be done, that have to be included, that he's mentioned already. And for the needs assessment, it's basically the most up to date, as possible, and it even includes language from the state that, if there already is a needs assessment, then you just need to go about updating it. So I bring this up because we have what we've currently collected and what's currently available, but in a few months' time, I would say that it would be worthwhile to go back and look through it and make sure if the 2020 census does come out, or we have other more up-to-date relevant data, to see if things need to be updated as we go along. So I don't view it as a static document, particularly at this point, and definitely, and after December, hopefully it won't be static either, but at least for now, I would say that if there are more data that comes out, I think we'll keep an eye on that and make sure that it's updated as we go along. I wouldn't anticipate giant changes between what is currently, available in the 2020 census, because, this is based on the American Community Survey. So those are, kept up to date as best as possible. So I wouldn't anticipate huge variations between what we have now and data down the road. But, obviously we'd keep an eye on that.
What I'm also hearing is that this document would be created in such a structured way that if new data became available, it would be pretty easy to plug in the data points.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say that is 100% correct.
Okay. And if I just may, I see Janet, can I just do a quick follow-up and then I'll get to you? I see your hand raised. I'm just curious. Point of clarification. Hate to be sounding so rigid or businesslike maybe in this first session, but from my own understanding, so this contract is through the end of the calendar year, correct?
That's
right. And I heard, can you say 6 meetings and then 2 community engagements? Is that part of the 6 or in addition to the 6?
That is in addition to the 6.
Okay. Appreciate that. Good. Janet, your hand is raised and you've been exceedingly patient. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm going to hope I don't have to mute with misbehaving children at the moment. But a couple questions. First of all, the age of senior citizens used in this study was 65. So I'm just curious, with 55 plus communities or Social Security starting at 62, why did we choose 65 as the minimum for measuring senior citizens in town?
I can go back and find if there's updated data based on, 65 was used because that was the cutoff in the particular data that the census has right now. It depends on what data point we're looking at. So there may be instances where it breaks it down more by, smaller age groups. And in those instances, we can go back and, do a 55 and older, 62 and older, et cetera. It just kind of depends on which data point we're using at. So if 65 and older is the only thing that is the only breakdown of senior citizen, then that's what was used for this. But, I'll make a note and we can go back and take a look at those. And there are instances definitely that it would make sense to break it down a little further. There are to go on the opposite side. There are instances where it again makes sense to break down. So there's, under 18, but then also, a younger, a younger cohort, like let's say 5 and under. So it kind of depends on what's available and then what this committee and Ken and I view as important data that would show what actually the needs are. And we'll take that note down and we can go back and.
It's just that if you look at our 60 and over population, based on our last town census, we're about 33% of the population, which is much different than the number that you have in here. So I just want to make sure we're accurate.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, I know you guys met a lot for the master plan, and I think 6 meetings seems kind of light to me, and I'm wondering if that's realistic or not.
I think that it's realistic based on this is such a prescribed process that we have the 3 very distinct things that we need to do. We're also utilizing a template that other housing production plans that have been done by PVPC in the past has done. I know with regards to the master plan implementation committee, I navigated the tasks as I did with the very limited budget, just trying to get them the product that they needed. With regards to this budget, there's a little bit more, and I think that we can navigate if there's a need for additional meetings. But between Ted and I think we can figure out how to do that. But I think that's a good question. Yeah.
Okay, I think it sounds like there's some potential flexibility there if needed. But the sense that the understanding that does seem pretty templated in some ways, and also we have some data that we can work with, so we're not creating the data. Might be less time because we did do all that work for the MPIC, the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and a really good effort by a lot of folks in that town survey with a lot of good data, large N, which makes it relevant. So I'm hoping that will also speed our development of this. But I'm hearing some flexibility, Ken, if it's needed.
Yeah, I think that because, as I mentioned, the specificity of this plan and providing the data points. As you mentioned, Jim, there's data that is already collected via the survey that can give us insight into the town's appetite or sentiment regarding housing. So that will be, pushed forward in this document, as well as the data, which obviously we're still trying to see if 2020 census data comes in during this time of the plan development. But I think what will be new to this particular process in my working with the community is, and working not with any of you, particular to the open space plan, is looking at environmental constraints and presenting a map of that, and also discussing with this committee through thoughts that you may share of possible sightings for affordable housing or that type of, because that's part of this process. But that'll be in a future meeting. But I think these first 2 meetings, we're going to be navigating the data that we'll be presenting, the constraints, and the various data points that we know we have that we can just present to you. And then your response and your participation in this particular process would be, that doesn't seem right. Let's look at a separate data point, or let's see if we can address this, or try to get this data if this exists. And Ted and I, we can figure out how to navigate, those types of questions. But again, we're utilizing plans that have been produced, that have been approved by the Department of Housing and Community Development. So we're trying not to necessarily recreate the wheel, but also, and we also know that you have multiple planning documents within a 2-year frame that I think hopefully will all align and should all align.
What I'm hearing is replicate where you've had there's been success elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I have another question, but I want to make sure I'm giving everyone an opportunity. I'm not missing any hands raised. Not seeing any. All right, so I don't know what this work group thinks of this. My next question, it's really, normally at the end of a meeting, Ken, we talk about next meeting time, but I know there was quite a bit of discussion before this night about what works for folks as far as meeting nights. So if we're talking about logistics now, does it make sense to hash that out now as far as how we're going to meet and how often, or is that an end of the meeting kind of thing, folks? I'm just, what do people think? Because we are seemingly talking about some logistics here. Anyone opposed to knocking that out now? Just because sometimes you wait to the end, everyone's tired, and it might be something that we really need to figure out. So maybe while we're all not quite so tired, we address the idea. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Let's do that then. Let's talk about meeting frequency. We know the basic number of meetings, but also logistics of day and time. Okay. I'm going to start with our guests from the planning board. You normally meet on Wednesdays. Is that correct, Daniel?
Yep. Wednesday.
Yeah. First and third, is that right?
And it's Wednesday. It's starting at 7:00, if that helps.
But it's not every Wednesday, right?
It's not. Oh, no, it's not every Wednesday.
First and third.
That part I have to look up. I don't know if it's what the periodicity is.
Typically the first and third, but
okay.
Yeah.
Not meeting until September, off for July and August.
Well, I like that schedule. Okay, so that gives us some flexibility. Before we go any further, does anyone have any opposition? So here we are on a Wednesday at 6:00. How is this time working for folks?
Well, I'm also a member of the technology committee that meets at 6:00, so I try to skip the other.
Is that a weekly meeting, Daniel?
Every other week.
On Wednesdays.
But I'll skip that meeting to attend this meeting. I'll just make sure they know.
Well,
We could also do it on alternate weeks of the tech committee.
yes.
Yeah.
We can.
Like it was supposed to be tonight, but all of a sudden they canceled it. So
okay. That works.
Scheduled for 30th now.
Yeah.
So not to get too mired in details here, Daniel, but do you know if the technology, they meet every other or second and fourth?
It's every 2 weeks.
Regardless.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
every 2 weeks.
So we know minimally, if we meet 2 weeks from today, we're not going to conflict with you.
Yeah.
Okay. And in worst case scenario, if we stumble upon a meeting that's also a tech meeting, you will prioritize this.
Yes.
That's commitment. I love it. Okay. Thank you. So I'm hearing that Wednesdays at 6:00 works for folks.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. Okay, good. So I will say that it works mostly for me, except the first Wednesday. So that's nice. Okay. So I'm going to defer to Ken and Ted as far as frequency, what you recommend based on previous experience working in towns. Is there, I know you say till December, is there logic to uploading a few meetings first and then doing some research, or what do you recommend?
I think it's probably towards the end that we'll have to maybe meet more frequently, and that's particularly because our goal is to get this to review by the state at the end of November. So December will be used to wait for the comments, address comments, and then get you a plan by the end of the year. So
Comment from the state, you're saying?
Comment from the state, if they need to be addressed any further. So, I think, again, because these first two sections are basically presentation of data, I think our next meeting is probably going to be, in my head, trying to schedule the community meeting. But if the working group wants to meet to see what we're going to present, we can do that too. And then the future meeting after that community meeting talk about goals based on the debrief from the community meeting and what is going to be in the first section of this plan, which is the needs. I think with regards to my schedule, I have worked with 3 planning boards. So my Mondays and Tuesdays and this Wednesday seem to work. And I think the second and fourth Wednesdays probably work the best for me. If that means anything. Because I think based on Paul's email, he said the first and third Wednesdays, I think, were the planning board. And I usually have meetings on the first Wednesday for a planning board. So if the fourth Wednesday as a standing meeting is helpful, that works for me, and I think probably for Ted, hopefully.
Okay. Hearing no objections from Ted, I see a hand for Janet.
Yeah, just a quick question about the community meeting being during July or August, if I understood you correctly. I mean, is that going to be, I can hear Facebook exploding now.
Tough draw.
Why would they have it during the summer, when nobody's here or whatever? So because I haven't gone through this before, July, August, okay timeframe to do in your experience? I mean,
probably look at
options.
August is probably a better month than July. I think if between and maybe this is our point then, that we will just get the first section of the plan done for the working groups review between now and our next committee meeting, and then work towards scheduling that, or maybe even start looking at dates, which I probably will continue to be virtual for a community meeting.
Yeah, I think that's the part to remember. Like I meet with people around the world all day, so people can't say just because it's in the summer they can't attend the meeting if it's virtual. So, they can log on.
If we have it virtual, I was thinking live, so I guess that was virtual is a whole different thing. So I'm just trying to move forward, but maybe virtual would be the better option.
We're hardy New Englanders. We can make it through anything.
Yeah, virtual makes it easier to have it.
Is there a preferred, Ted and I have been working on numerous communities and engaging and doing community meetings virtually on basically every day of the week except for Sunday. And so we've had successful weekend 10 to noon type meetings, but then we also have successful evening meetings. And typically our in-person meetings would probably be in the evening. But I guess to be mindful of maybe things that are happening in Southampton this summer, and you may have a better idea of different types of programming. Is there a certain day or a week that we shouldn't be looking at due to certain things happening in town? I think the goal probably will be to look at the last week of July into the first week of August, since I think we should commit to doing this virtually, and looking at those 2 weeks. And if one week works better or some certain days work better, then we can navigate that.
So I think, Ken, the only thing I can recollect in town that happens, over summer, I don't know if didn't happen last summer because of COVID. I don't see anything about yet scheduled for this summer, but there were summer concert series that took place on I think a Wednesday or a Thursday night.
They're scheduled, Jim.
They are, okay. Yeah. What night of the week are they scheduled, Jim?
Like Wednesday, I'm sure it's on a Wednesday as usual. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but.
Right. So while this this work group can meet on Wednesdays. I would recommend we don't have a community engagement on a Wednesday. Is there any utility, or is it even possible logistically to do some sort of hybrid where you have a community gathering, but you also tie in people who want to join virtually? Because I know there was talk about that, when the governor extended the virtual meetings.
I mean, we can, like we did with Southampton during the Master Plan Implementation Committee, be very, try to explore ways to do some sort of hybrid model. I think that's possible.
I offer an alternative. Instead of trying to do a hybrid, why don't we try to do a virtual, which is recorded, and give people time after the meeting to submit questions so that they can email them, obviously, or some way to give us feedback, so they have a period of time to watch. So, and just like this is all recorded for Easthampton Public Media, and for, I think it goes on YouTube also, that they could watch it on their in their time, and then ask the questions, and perhaps we have the session after just answering any of those questions, addressing those people's concerns if they weren't addressed the first time.
That sounds like 2 meetings, which makes the 4 meetings. My only concern, right? And I think questions provoke other questions from people. So that's just my initial gut reaction. I may be way off.
You're right.
I think hybrid meetings are very challenging, but Ken's probably better at it than I would be.
We haven't really done hybrid meetings. Go ahead, Ted.
We just did one, the first one ever, I guess, in another town. And yes, I will agree with Janet. It was very challenging. It was a good turnout, and it actually was great to have. I think the biggest issue was that me and the people that were presenting were remote, and I think and then a lot of people were actually in town hall, which was good, I guess. But it was just kind of the mix was actually a little more challenging than if it was just one or the other. So having just done that, and that was a smaller hybrid meeting than I would hope that this would be. So I would recommend we maybe try to stick with one. And the other thing is, if this can, we do virtual for this one, this first one, and it just, maybe it's not the best, then we can always tweak it for the second one too. So just from personal experience, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, and we got to remember, this is an open meeting that any time we're having these working groups, someone could join. So it's not like they only have one chance. So.
Right. I think that there's going to be opportunity, definitely. And really, I think, sure, there may be questions about the data that we're producing, but the data is the data. And the where I see probably more participation is how the community wants to participate with regards to the goals, setting the goals, and discussing the strategies to achieve them. And so I think, to Dan's point, is that these are obviously open to the public. There may be questions asked during it, and Ted and I, as Ted said in the beginning, we will make every attempt to answer them. They're probably very technical questions that may require us to go back and look for the answer. But at the same time, I think we're progressing in this process through a regular planning process, which is, providing you the data. This is where we are. This is what we're seeing with other communities and how they're trying to tackle some of these housing issues. And then working with this working group, which reflects the Housing Authority and then also the Planning Board. Two very important committees in town government with regards to development in general. So I think there is going to be ample opportunity for participation, and we'll make every effort with regards to making sure these are posted, and utilizing the town website if we need to post links and post documents. We can work with the town administrator to do that. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, this is a good discussion. I appreciate everyone's input and thoughts on this, and we can tweak it as we go. But it seems like using one means, a single means, makes sense to start, and that would makes sense as virtual.
So, I mean, I think where we left off was discussing possible dates for that community meeting. More than likely, what Ted and I will do is complete the. So we're also working on timelines of other staff that are going to be involved in this process. So, we have a map person that is going to be doing maps for the plan with regards to environmental constraints. And I know his schedule opens up at the beginning of July. So I'm trying to, reserve his time for this particular project. So I think with regards to our next committee meeting, it will be a more full housing needs analysis assessment, which will reflect what usually you would find in a full plan document of that section. And then from there, probably what I would say and what I would say happens at the community or at that meeting is also a sharing of the presentation that we probably would do with the community, as well as discuss that exercise. But I think if we can pinpoint a date for both the next community, both a meeting of this working group and the community meeting, that probably should be the tasks for this evening.
Makes sense to me. Makes sense to me. Does anyone have any further input, comments on?
How about the, go ahead.
I'm just going to say we're looking like an early August timeframe. Ken, if we're looking to get a date, let's go there.
So that would be the week of August 2nd.
And Jim said Wednesday and the first week is not good, right?
That day will be fine.
Okay.
The other committee I'm on also takes a break for the summer, so.
Okay, my break is in July, so that I will have a meeting that day, that afternoon from 4 to 5:30, sometimes goes to 4 to 6. So,
is that a meeting of this working group or the community?
No, this is the Council on Aging. I'm the chair of that board, so we meet the first Wednesday afternoon of the month. So, but I'm sure that I can try to move the agenda along.
The only issue with that day, which would be August 4th, is that I usually have a standing planning board meeting with another community. So yeah, the first Wednesdays are like my planning board meetings. So if we could look at Thursday in the evening.
You're really throwing us a curve, Ken. Looking at a different day of the week now.
Well, for the community meeting.
Right, I'm teasing you.
Oh, we're talking about the community meeting here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
How about July 29th?
Does August 5th not work for you, Daniel?
Oh, August 5th works for me. That's fine.
Okay.
Do you want to have the working group meeting on the 28th to be consistent with the fourth Wednesday, and then have the community meeting on the 5th?
Sounds logical to me.
What time? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Janet.
I was just going to ask what time, from a community meeting perspective, what time seems to be best? Is 6 too early, or is
6:30 actually works.
6:30?
What I found is 6:30 to 8:30. If you think 6 works, that we can do that too.
No, it was a question, not it was just from your experience.
Yeah, I think we go with what your gut tells you or your experience tells you, Ken.
Yeah,
6:30.
6:30 seems to be a good time for community type meetings.
So just to summarize briefly, what's on the table is the working group meets again on July 28th at 6 p.m. and prepares for uses that time mostly to prep for the August 5th, which is a Thursday at 6:30 community engagement meeting. Is that an accurate summary?
Yeah.
And Ken, so we, at that point, we will give this committee, or before that 28th date, we will give this committee the most up-to-date needs assessment and then your section and anything else.
I would say that we can probably start putting together some just observations from other communities with regards to possible goals to look at, because I think what the committee for the meeting on the 28th those tasks that we'll probably want to do is to look and discuss the first draft, which we'll get to you a week before, which is your typical, what a typical section would look like in the plan. And then with that, work towards a presentation of sorts for the community meeting. I think in that time too, what probably will end up happening, as Ted is working on the needs analysis mostly, I'll be working with, with regards to the strategies and identifying, working with the committee on that, working group on that. So I think also because the committee is relatively small, which is nice because then we can have these great conversations, also share with you things that, in the interim with regards to possible thought processes with regards to the second half of the plan. But Ted, I think to answer your question, it's for the next meeting, it's going to be the first section of the plan, which is the housing analysis and also looking at constraints. And then a rough draft of the presentation for the community meeting.
So that makes me also want to reiterate to the committee that as we're going forward, if there are other, so in other words, don't wait, and we don't need to wait until the 28th. If there are other things that you think of or want to make sure that we include, just, email us or give us a call or something. But if there are pieces of this as we go forward that you want to see ahead of, instead of waiting a month to see it, then we can, send you that. But I also don't want to overwhelm you with every single, version and draft too. So I guess it will be dependent on how the committee feels about what you want to see over this time, or if it's good that we get to a week before you see what we've done and then we review it at the committee meeting. That's a comment and a question, I guess.
I think that's I'm fine with seeing things as you develop them. Anyone can consume this differently. They can wait to the end and consume it, the week before, or see, if you're willing to share prior. I'm wondering if it makes sense to start just an email group among the members here, which I'm happy to do if people want to, I think I have everyone's email. I'm not sure if I have yours, Ted or Sarah. I don't know, everyone just drop their email in the chat, for example, or I could just send an email out of what I have. But again, I don't have Sarah's. And I don't know if I have yours, Ted.
I just dropped it in the chat.
Okay, I see it. Great. Thank you.
I'm not going to drop mine in chat because then it has to become part of the official minutes.
I know yours, Dan.
Well, good.
What I'll do too is share with the committee, the working group, two different types of housing production plans. So PVPC did both a larger town recently of West Springfield, which obviously is a lot larger than Southampton. And then we also did one a couple of years ago for Hatfield, which is a lot smaller. So I think obviously the data points are similar. The product is going to be different, and the strategies are going to be different because of the different types of community. So I think if you want to start thinking about strategies to address whatever your perception of affordable housing need, you are identifying either in your committee or in your housing authority or the planning board, that also I think warrants a conversation. So in addition to the PowerPoint that I created for the joint session of the planning board, which just outlines the process, and then I'll also include two examples of housing production plans for the committee, the working group to look at, while Ted and I complete the first section of the housing production plan, which is the needs assessment.
Yeah, I want to add one comment on because I've been on your side of things, I don't want you to feel like because we're saying, oh, you can send out things weekly or request things weekly, that you have to put a lot of polish on them. I don't want you to have to spend your time, effort into shining things up for us. Put your effort into getting the results, not making it look pretty for a presentation. Save that for the end.
I prefer look pretty.
Well, we attempt to make it look pretty, but I'm sure there may be some typos, and we're gonna
just
apologize for that beforehand.
No, I appreciate that input, Daniel. Yeah, and I'm going to suggest this is probably Captain Obvious here, but in addition to looking at these documents that we receive, all of us, if we're not already, should really be looking over the master plan implementation that was just published, and also the survey results, which I know the survey results are available on the town website. I don't know if the latest MPI, what was approved, is now published. But minimally, we can look at the survey because that's still out, I believe, on the town website. I haven't been on the town website in a couple of weeks. Does anyone? Maybe I'll just look it up while we're talking. But
I can share with you those documents too. I mean, in addition to everything else, I'll share the survey results that I have. Hopefully they reflect there have been many iterations between myself and Chris Falls to get it to the product that the town has on its website. So I'll make sure that what I have.
That certainly sounds easier, Kevin. Appreciate that easy button.
Instead of looking.
So maybe what I can do is when I send out this initial broadcast email to everyone in the group to start the email group, you can respond with those two documents. That would be fabulous.
And do we need to make any kind of reference to the last housing production plan we made like 10 years ago? Do we need to, keep an eye on that, see if there's some continuity, or is the newest master plan kind of supersede that?
No, I think what ends up happening, I think, during these document reviews is to really look at the strategies and the goals that have set up. I think that you're going to find that there's going to be some overlap, that there are going to be some similar sentiment, whether or not, and I think what some of the hardship of the master plan implementation committee during, being part of that process is that the momentum of trying to implement was like thwarted for a couple of years. So, but I think the goal still remained. And I think some of those same strategies were outlined. But we're definitely going to, in the plan, discuss that we looked at it and probably bring to the narrative some of those strategies that are outlined that seem to align with all the rest of your community plans. But it's good to know that you have a housing plan from 10 years ago.
Do you have access to it? Have you seen it?
We do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I was gonna. Thanks for bringing that up, Sierra. I was going to mention that as another one that we should send out and include for everyone to look over, because it's definitely going to be. It's more comprehensive than what this section is going to be, but it's. There, as Ken was saying, there is a lot of overlap and a lot of things that are updated, but also they'll be very similar to what it was 10 years ago, which that makes sense. But yeah, that's another one to take a look at and just see what, especially any goals or things that were included in that 10 years ago, if they've been met, and also if we want to keep including them in this particular production plan. But again, that actually, I think we're talking about the same thing, because there is a Southampton housing needs assessment that's a very comprehensive needs assessment. It's not a housing production plan, but it's like what we're talking about now, more in depth. So maybe there's also another housing production plan, but that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, I think we'll make sure that however it's titled, that report, that it is incorporated correctly. Because if it's not a DHCD plan, then it might have just been a study that was done regarding housing. But at the same time, that still doesn't deter, that still shouldn't create, just because it is not an official DHCD approved plan, it shouldn't deter us from using the words in it.
It looks like it says PVPC. I'm going to send
it's ours with the housing authority. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, okay. I don't think Ken and I were not here at that point, but it is ours. And housing authorities was the right. I think housing authority is on there.
You were both still in school, right? That's a long time ago.
Yeah, I wish.
Yes, the one you linked is the one I'm referring to.
Yeah. Okay.
So my initial question earlier, and this is probably a question for Dan since he's been on the planning board for a while, with regards to the status of the zoning bylaw update.
Yeah.
Where's the town?
So here's what I can tell you. They had the planning board, me as part of that, had started updating the bylaw before I had joined the committee. It was in process of an update. They said it's a very large overhaul. At one point, they said, Dan, we're not going to go back and go over the things that we've already done with you, but you can provide input. So I tried to provide input, and then I won't talk about that. So they're still in the process of updating it.
With that said, obviously we're going to utilize what the town is currently working with. So is the version on the website the most up-to-date version? And has the town had any recent bylaw amendments or map amendments that could be helpful in this? Because sometimes we have missing pieces of information that probably would be helpful.
Yep. Maybe with Sarah joining, she can get a clearer picture on these things. These are some of the mysteries that I wonder being on that board. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think what as that's usually something that I would be doing in looking at the zoning, is probably identify if there has been any zoning amendments or map amendments in the past 10 years. And if, the document that is on the website is the current up-to-date. Because I think the way that it's presented on the website is confusing. There's like two separate files, like a part 1 and a part 2. And yeah, it's confusing. But that's not to say that it's not the most up-to-date. So hopefully that'll be the case. So I think with regards to the document that Ted shared and we shared earlier today, if the working group wants to look at it, and then maybe if there are particular questions and or thoughts regarding the data, I know Janet brought up a point about the senior, the age breakdown. But if there are other elements of the data that has been initially presented that we can address, please just send us a note. Otherwise, I think the next time you see this will be refined, formatted, and presented in a way that makes sense. That if the state were reviewing, they'd say, "This is a good housing needs assessment."
The question I had looking through it, and maybe I just missed it, is my question is, of all, maybe this is an easy question to answer, of all the currently available non-developed acreage in town, how much of that is developable?
We haven't done that particular analysis yet. So that, I think, that information will be reflected in the next iteration of this.
Do you think that's worth figuring out?
It definitely is.
Okay.
It definitely is with regards to the amount of developable land. You want to address slopes, you want to address environmental constraints, wet, just to see how housing can be developed in town. And with that said, again, an analysis of the zoning to suggest that in your zoning districts you have large setbacks, which may preclude certain types of housing development, that also will be brought forward as far as some challenges to developing that affordable housing or more affordable housing. But yeah, I think in short, Dan, the environmental constraints and looking at developable land is going to be part of this analysis.
Okay. Any additional questions?
Yeah, I had one more question that came from when Mr. Seating, when he visited us at the planning board. You brought up a lot of good topics about different building. I'm sorry, way to say this. Different building types or using different zoning districts and those. Is that something we'd look at, like the
like overlay districts and things like that?
Yeah, would that be something that we would be maybe trying to discuss in this process, or is that something you've already covered as your group?
Well, I'm very, very open. If it fits within the scope of this, I'm absolutely open to that, to looking at, creative ways that we can, utilize zoning to promote,
right,
price points for housing more at the lower end than the higher end.
To me, like, I want to gather data and I want to come out with solutions. And I think you presented some solutions and I want to build on that. And we see where we can go with that,
Certainly some possibilities, right? So
possibilities.
Yeah. Ken, is that like too big of, or is that within the wheelhouse? Or is that beyond the scope?
That's in the wheelhouse. A strategy could be to look at your current zoning and examining where you allow denser development, adopting a village center, utilizing in my recollection of the master plan, the various areas of the community where you could foresee some additional housing in a mixed use type setting, and looking at those regulations that permit you to develop that. It's going to be brought up in the zoning analysis as possibly an impediment, but at the same time, you can address that within the strategy for the town to explore increased density. But again, I think as you are aware, as you all live in town, and Jim being part of the master plan committee, the survey is it does suggest that a majority of the community is love their large parcels, large single family home parcels. So navigating that and understanding that will hopefully create some sort of dialogue and communication to address the housing need.
We have to acknowledge that that's part of the data.
Right.
But I'd say that my question about that though is that those are the people that already live here, right? They like their big houses. They can afford their big houses. The people who don't live here, do they like the big houses, and can they afford the big houses? Right. Those are the people I want to know about, and how do we get them here?
Right. Well, we're probably getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but that was certainly discussed in the candidates' nights when the select board candidates were presented. There are a couple of the candidates mentioned that. It's all about, creating space for all folks. I have a question for the group, because I always get a little bit paranoid about this. I just want to make sure as we're emailing one another, and sharing information that we don't violate any open meeting laws by, quote, meeting outside of a scheduled meeting. So I don't know, we just have to be aware of that. I think it's fine to receive data and say, look at this, review it, et cetera. We want to avoid, I think, email discussions.
I think, Jim, I think that's correct. And at least what you'll be receiving from Ted and I are, it's FYI, here's what we've worked on, here's what you're looking at. And if the committee wants to address that, I think they can either email us and we can address it again after getting that comment and figure out that line of communication. But yeah, I think you just want to be on the safe side as you are, communicating regarding the products you'll be receiving and looking at.
Okay. Good. All right. So we have a next meeting date. It sounds like we have our homework assignments. Again, I'm going to create an email group and send it to everyone. Ken and Ted will respond with, I believe, 3 documents. The master plan, final version, the survey results, cleaned up in final version, and the previous housing production plan will be received by all of us for our consumption review and education and understanding prior to our next meeting on the 28th of July at 6 p.m. Is that a fair summary, Ken and Ted?
Yes.
And members, planning board, housing authority. Good. We have another member of the planning board. Excellent. We'll bring him in young. Okay.
That's why we do all the things we do, right?
Right. Exactly. Thanks for that reminder, Daniel. It's about the future. Good. Okay. I always feel, am I missing something? But it feels like we're coming to a conclusion here. Is there anything that I'm missing, starting with our experts, but anyone who's on the call that needs to be covered tonight?
I just want to reiterate, so when you get some of these documents, in some of them you may have already seen or worked on, they're not small. There's a lot in there. The answer to a question may be in there, and we just don't know at this point. So don't feel like, just please ask the question or bring it up and make sure that, it's on our radar. That's all. I just want to make sure that I know you, having worked with you now for a total of, 2 days, I definitely know that you will, but I just want to make sure that, don't hesitate to email us about whatever.
And I think it's fair to ask, it doesn't violate any open meeting laws to ask a question or a point of clarification and have that answered.
Yeah, particularly if we're not making any decisions over
Exactly.
email, that kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. Just to give everyone that understanding and permission. Good. All right. I think we're good, folks. Some good work for a first night.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for leading us through this. You're starting us off.
Doing my best. You guys are a good group to work with, so you made it easy. Thank you. And we're accepting of my stumbles. I appreciate that. Okay. We know when we're meeting next, so we don't have to set a next meeting date. I think it's a working group, but we'll make it kind of official. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Can I ask a question beforehand, Jim? Just a real quick.
Certainly.
Rather than list it, this is our internal stuff, as a housing authority meeting, maybe we should just set up something called the Housing Production Plan Work Group to differentiate our meeting from the housing authority meeting from this meeting, if people are comfortable with that.
I'm definitely on board with that. In fact, I was assuming that. So I appreciate you bringing that up to clarify, because that was actually my assumption, Jim.
Yeah, unless somebody decided to name it and do something differently. I scheduled this one as the housing authority simply with this as this as the agenda, but
right.
We hadn't talked about that, so.
Right.
I will.
True. So going forward, I would call this the Housing Production Plan Work Group. Unless anyone has an issue with that
work group
lengthy title.
Well, shorten it to HPP. Is that okay?
Sure.
Because I'm not sure there's room enough on the line.
All right. Any further questions? A motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Right. By a voice vote with your last name.
LaValle?
Sorry.
I don't know.
I heard Kane, aye. Okay.
Simmons, aye.
Dan, did I hear you or no?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. LaValle, aye.
Okay. And Sini, aye. And I think that's, for now, all the voting members anyway. Correct? Yeah.
So go get sworn in, Sarah, tomorrow if you can.
Yeah, tomorrow morning. I didn't check my email till today, so she was like, "Can you tell me if you accept or not?" I was like, "Oh, I guess they're closed now. Sorry about that."
You get to take some ethics training. It's fun. Not really.
Well, I already did the ethics training, and
wow, you guys are good.
I had a very good. Yeah, I did it when I was appointed, so I had a very good time with that. Yeah.
Yeah,
how about you, Sarah?
Available till noon tomorrow, so just kind of heads up.
Oh, okay. Till noon tomorrow. I'll call in the morning.
Awesome. Yeah, then you too can take those ethics trainings. All right. Well, thank you all. I appreciate everyone attending. I'm excited. This is going to be a good work group. I think we're going to get some good work done. Get your glasses out, start reading all those reports, and we'll see you all again on July 28th.
I thought you meant
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Bye-bye.
All right.